Weeds do not take days off. You pull them on Saturday. They are back by Wednesday. You membrane them in spring. The membrane fails by autumn. You bark chip over everything and spend the following March topping it up again. The weed control industry built an entire business model around that cycle. Buy it, apply it, watch it fail, buy it again. Here's what nobody in that aisle will tell you. The most effective weed suppression system ever developed is not a product. It is a plant, a living carpet that builds soil, feeds pollinators, and gets stronger every year without your help. 20 ground covers that take over your garden and stop weeds permanently. One was used by Roman engineers to stabilize roads across an entire empire. And the #1 entry blooms every February without being asked, spreads without being watered, and was carried to his grave by Napoleon as a symbol of everything he had lost. Most gardeners pull it out without knowing what it is. Subscribe now. Let's count them down. Number 20, creeping thyme. The carpet that smells like a kitchen. You can walk on it, mow it, ignore it for an entire season. It comes back every time and blooms pink and purple across the ground while doing it. That is not a feature. That is the whole point. Ancient Egyptians used thyme in embalming. Greeks burned it as temple incense. Thymus serpyllum, the creeping form, was recorded growing across the chalk downlands of England in Gerard's Herbal of 1597. Medieval monastery gardeners used it specifically as path edging because foot traffic released the scent. That was a deliberate choice, practical and beautiful at the same time. The science caught up later. The dense mat of tiny stems creates a physical barrier. Weeds cannot penetrate. The roots release compounds that inhibit germination of competing plants, confirmed in allelopathy research. The monks did not know the chemistry. They knew the outcome. Plant it between paving stones, along sunny dry banks, at path edges. It tolerates foot traffic and rewards it with scent. Bark chip replaced it. A product that needs annual topping up beat out a living system that improves every year. Think of it as the garden floor that works while you are inside doing something else. Beauty that serves a function is twice the value of beauty alone. Number 19, Ajuga, the purple carpet. Nobody waters. Most gardeners have never heard of it. The ones who have cannot stop planting it. Ajuga reptans spreads by runners, tolerates deep shade, produces vivid purple flower spikes every spring that stop people mid-stride, and it is evergreen. Weed suppression does not pause for winter. European folk medicine documented it from the medieval period as a wound herb. The common name is bugle. John Parkinson included it in Paradisus terrestris in 1629 as both ornamental and medicinal. Physic gardens across England grew it for centuries before the bedding plant industry decided seasonal color was more profitable than permanent ground cover. It spreads by stolons that root wherever they touch soil. The dense, low canopy blocks light to weed seeds completely. Recent horticultural research confirmed what cottage gardeners observed for centuries. The dense evergreen mat reduces soil moisture loss and suppresses germination of annual weed seeds more effectively than most commercial membrane products tested against it. In shade so deep that grass gives up entirely, Ajuga keeps going. Plant it under trees, between shrubs, in the border gaps that stay bare no matter what you try. Divide every few years to keep it vigorous. The bedding plant model needed you to replant every spring. Ajuga needed you to plant it once and leave it alone. Only one of those models made money for the nursery trade. The plants that work through winter without being watched are the ones most worth keeping. Number 18, sweet woodruff. The shade specialist with a medieval past. Dry shade under established trees. North-facing beds. The corners most gardeners write off and fill with gravel because nothing else survives there. Sweet woodruff does not just survive there, it thrives. Gallium odoratum. In German, it is called Waldmeister, forest master. The name is earned. Rhineland records from 1432 document sprigs of it added to white wine and sugar for the traditional May festival drink. Monastery infirmary gardens across Central Europe grew it through the medieval period for its sedative and wound healing properties. A plant with a documented social life and a medical record, it spreads by underground rhizome. Coumarin released from the dried leaves gives it a distinctive vanilla and hay scent, and inhibits fungal growth in the soil layer beneath it. The ground it covers is actively conditioned as it spreads. It does not just suppress weeds, it improves the space it occupies. Virtually indestructible once established. Under conifers, in dry shade that defeats everything else. Plant it and stop apologizing for that corner. Think of it as the forest master that took one look at your problem corner and decided it was home. The places we give up on are often exactly where the right plant has been waiting. Number 17, brass buttons. The living carpet that replaced my lawn. I pulled up a 2-meter square patch of struggling lawn 3 years ago, replaced it with brass buttons. I have not touched it since. From a distance, it looks like a formal lawn. Dense, even, green with a bronze tint that catches low light in autumn, in a way grass never does. Up close, the feathery foliage is unlike anything in a conventional lawn, and it has never needed mowing, feeding, or watering beyond rainfall. Leptonella squalida, native to New Zealand. Maori communities used it for ground stabilization on riverbanks and disturbed soil for generations before European contact. The botanist Joseph Banks collected specimens during Cook's first voyage in 1769. It arrived in British gardens in the 1880s as a novelty lawn alternative. The novelty wore off. The plant stayed useful. Creeping stems root at nodes as they spread. The foliage is so dense, it creates complete light exclusion at ground level. Tolerates light foot traffic. Grows in sun or partial shade without complaint. Plant it between stepping stones, as a lawn alternative in small spaces. Along border edges where you want something low and permanent. Think of it as the lawn that never needed a mower or an apology. Some replacements turn out to be upgrades. Number 16, creeping jenny. The gold that spreads itself. There is a color in this plant that does not look real in shade. Vivid chartreuse yellow, luminous. It lights up the dark corners of a garden the way nothing structural ever quite manages, and it spreads without being asked. Lysimachia numularia. Common name, moneywort. Documented in English herbals from the 16th century. Culpeper prescribed it for wounds and fevers. Gerard described it growing along riverbanks and shaded lanes across England as though it had always been there, because it had. The golden form came later, but the species itself has been a garden and hedgerow plant for centuries. It spreads by surface runners that root at every node, tolerates waterlogged soil that defeats most ground covers, adapts from full sun to full shade without complaint. That adaptability is what makes it unstoppable in the right hands. Planted at pond edges, in damp shaded areas that stay wet through winter, on slopes that drain too poorly for anything else. It was labeled invasive in parts of North America, and the reputation spread far beyond the regions where it was actually a problem. A local classification became a global dismissal. Think of it as the plant whose reputation traveled faster than the facts did. Sometimes the most useful things get lost to a story that was never the whole truth. Number 15, Vinca minor, the evergreen that never stops. There is a Vinca minor growing in a Somerset churchyard that has been documented in the same spot for over 200 years. Not estimated, recorded. The same root, still spreading, still flowering every spring. That is not unusual for this plant. That is just what it does. Periwinkle. Present in English cottage gardens since the Tudor period. Culpeper wrote about it at length. Folk medicine across Europe used it for memory and circulation for centuries. Then, modern pharmaceutical research extracted vincamine from the leaves and developed drugs for cognitive decline from it. The healers who planted it for memory were doing something chemically accurate. They just did not have the vocabulary yet. It spreads by layering. Stems touch soil, root, send out new stems. The mat that forms is interconnected underground and almost impossible to displace once established. Evergreen, suppressing weeds through all 12 months, including the winter gap when most ground covers leave the soil exposed. Banks, slopes, under trees. Anywhere erosion is a genuine problem. Think of it as the plant that remembered what it was doing long after the gardener forgot why they planted it. Consistency across 2 centuries is not stubbornness. It is proof. Number 14, chamomile. The lawn that smells like an apology. Sir Francis Drake allegedly played bowls on a chamomile lawn at Plymouth Hoe in 1588. Whether that specific story is true or not, chamomile lawns were genuinely fashionable in Elizabethan England, and John Gerard documented exactly why. The more it is trodden, the faster it grows. His exact words, still accurate today: Chamomile nobile, Roman chamomile. The non-flowering lawn variety is called treenig. It spreads by surface runners and releases apigenin from crushed leaves under foot pressure. Anti-inflammatory. The scent released when you walk across it is not incidental. It is the plant's chemical response to pressure. It gets more generous the harder you push down on it. I planted a small chamomile patch between 2 garden seats 3 summers ago. Every time someone sits down and shifts their feet, the whole area releases scent. Guests notice it before they notice anything else in the garden. Dry, sunny banks, small lawn areas, seating spaces where foot traffic is light but regular. Think of it as the garden surface that rewards every step you take across it. The things that respond to pressure by becoming more generous are worth building your garden around. Number 13. Wild ginger, the forest floor that feeds itself. This plant does not rush. It takes 2 full seasons to establish. Then it becomes completely self-sustaining, and nothing grows through it again. That patience is not a flaw. It is the contract. Asarum canadense, native to North American woodland. The Ojibwe, Cherokee, and Iroquois all use the root independently, as a food flavoring, as medicine. European botanists documented it from the 17th century onward. Early settlers used the root as a culinary ginger substitute because the aroma was close enough to make it worth trying. It is not related to culinary ginger botanically. The resemblance is coincidental and useful. Spreads by rhizome, slow and permanent. Creates a ground layer so dense that nothing penetrates it once the colony is established. Deciduous, but the root system continues suppressing weeds through winter beneath the soil surface. Deep shade under established trees. North-facing slopes, woodland gardens, the conditions where most ground covers quietly fail. The modern garden center model is built around instant visual impact. Plants are sold in flower, in full growth, ready to perform immediately. Wild ginger arrives looking modest and takes a full season before it shows any ambition. That single quality made it commercially unviable in a retail environment designed around impulse decisions. Think of it as the ground cover that asks for patience and pays it back for decades. The best things in a garden rarely arrive on your schedule. Number 12, ladies' mantle, the dew catcher. Every morning, without fail, raindrops and dew collect in the pleated leaves like mercury, perfect silver beads sitting in the folds. The same plant, the same quiet display. Whether you are watching or not, medieval alchemists collected that dew, believing it had transformative properties. The name comes from the Arabic alchemia, alchemy. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century German abbess and herbalist, documented ladies' mantle for wound healing and feminine health around 1150. A serious medical plant for centuries before it became a garden border staple. Alchemilla mollis, spreads by seed and shallow rhizome. Self-seeds prolifically in the right conditions. The soft, hairy leaves create a dense canopy at ground level that blocks light completely. The chartreuse flower froth in early summer softens every border edge it touches. Planted along path margins, under roses where it suppresses competing weeds and softens bare soil. At border edges where the texture contrast does the most visual work. If you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. The top 10 are where this list gets genuinely surprising. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss them. Think of it as the plant that turned collecting morning dew into a daily philosophy. Small beauty that shows up without being summoned is the most reliable kind. Number 11, hardy geranium, the cottage garden workhorse. It covers ground, blooms for months, suppresses weeds, attracts pollinators, looks good dying back in autumn. Cut it hard after the first flowering flush, and it blooms again. There is almost nothing a hardy geranium does not do. Geranium species appear across European herbals from the 16th century onward. Geranium praetens, the meadow cranesbill, is native to Britain and Northern Europe. Used in folk medicine for wound healing and digestive complaints. By the Victorian period, hardy geraniums were so standard in cottage gardens that writers stopped explaining why and simply listed them. The name cranesbill comes from the elongated seed head, once you know that you cannot unsee it. Geranium macrorhizum specifically deserves its own mention. Dry shade, poor soil, root-filled ground under established shrubs. It handles all of it and smells faintly of pine when you brush past it. I used it to solve a bare patch under a mature viburnum that had defeated every other plant I tried. Within 2 seasons, it had covered the entire area and self-seeded beyond it. Think of it as the plant that turns problem ground into a solution without making a fuss about it. Reliability is an underrated form of beauty. The garden teaches you that eventually. Number 10, lamb's ear, the silver carpet. Children cannot stop touching. Every child who encounters this plant reaches out to touch it. Every single one. That has not changed in 400 years of cultivation, and it will not change now. Stachys byzantina, native to Turkey, Armenia, and Iran. Documented in Persian garden design from at least the 10th century. Grown in conditions where summer heat would defeat most European plants. Brought to Western gardens in the 17th century and established in English cottage gardens by the 18th. The common name describes the texture exactly. Soft, silver, impossibly tactile for something growing out of the ground. The silver foliage reflects heat and dries quickly after rain. Creates conditions most weed seeds cannot germinate in. Spreads by surface runners. Evergreen in mild climates. The color contrast it creates at border edges is one of the most effective design tools in a dry, sunny garden. Gravel gardens. Front of borders. Path edging where the texture is most visible and most touched. Minimalist planting trends pushed it aside in favor of grasses and structural perennials. Soft and tactile got dismissed as old-fashioned. The plant kept being useful regardless. Think of it as the plant that survived Persian summers and English winters without changing a single thing about itself. The things that endure without adapting are usually the ones that were right from the start. Number 9. Corsican mint, the smallest carpet with the strongest scent. It grows to 1 centimeter tall. Each leaf is smaller than a fingernail. It spreads across the ground like a fine green mist between paving stones and into the gaps that no other ground cover reaches. Walk across it and the entire garden smells of peppermint. Mentha requieni, native to Corsica and Sardinia. Used in traditional Corsican folk medicine as a digestive remedy for generations before plant hunters collected it and introduced it to British gardens in the 19th century. The essential oil is still used commercially in liqueur production. A plant this small with this much presence in the commercial fragrance world is not an accident. It creeps by surface runners at ground level so low it grows through paving cracks and under gaps that bark chip cannot reach. It requires moisture. It does not tolerate drought or heavy foot traffic. Give it a shaded, damp path, and it handles everything else. Between paving stones, in shaded path margin, damp rockery pockets where larger ground covers overwhelm the space. Think of it as the ground cover that proves presence has nothing to do with size. The smallest things in a garden often carry the strongest argument for paying attention. Number 8. Bergenia, the elephant ears that never move. Enormous glossy leaves, completely evergreen. Turns burgundy and bronze through winter when most plants have quietly given up. Flowers pink in early spring before almost anything else in the garden is moving. Bergenia does not ask for anything. It simply stays. Bergenia crassifolia, native to Siberia and Central Asia. Introduced to European gardens in the 18th century and immediately useful in the conditions European gardeners found most difficult. Gertrude Jekyll, the most influential British garden designer of the early 20th century, used Bergenia as a structural ground cover throughout her work at Munstead Wood in Surrey. She called it one of the most useful plants in the garden. Her endorsement shaped British planting for a generation, and she was not wrong. Large leaves create near total shade at ground level. Spreads slowly by rhizome. Tolerates dry shade, wet soil, coastal exposure, and hard frost without complaint. The kind of plant that makes difficult corners look intentional. Base of walls, north-facing beds, the spots that feel like problems to be managed. Think of it as the plant Gertrude Jekyll reached for when she had run out of excuses to plant anything fussier. Some plants do not need your attention. They just need your permission to stay. Number 7. Dead nettle, the weed that became a garden plant. Most gardeners pull this out on sight. The ones who leave it discover it covers bare ground faster than almost anything they could deliberately plant. Same effort, completely different outcome. Lamium maculatum, silver-marked leaves that brighten dark corners the way paint cannot. Documented in European herbals from the 16th century as a wound herb and bee plant. Used continuously across northern European folk medicine for centuries. It is called dead nettle because it resembles stinging nettle but does not sting. A plant named entirely for what it is not. That naming decision cost it 400 years of reputation. Spreads by surface runners that root at nodes. Tolerates deep, dry shade under established trees where almost nothing else survives. Evergreen through mild winters. The silver markings on the leaves do something structural in dark corners that green foliage alone never quite manages. Dry shade. Under deciduous trees. Between shrubs in compacted root-filled soil. The conditions that defeat the plants you actually paid for. The association with stinging nettle built a reputation it never deserved. A name that implied something unwanted attached itself permanently to something genuinely useful. Think of it as the plant that got dismissed for resembling something it never was. What we call a thing shapes whether we ever learn what it actually does. Number 6. Pachysandra, the evergreen ground layer that never needs you. Plant it, walk away. Come back the following spring. It will be bigger, denser, and more effective than it was when you left it. That is the entire maintenance requirement. Pachysandra terminalis, native to Japan and China. Used as a temple garden ground layer in Japanese horticultural tradition for centuries before Western botanists cataloged it. Introduced to European and American gardens in the 19th century, and by the mid-20th century, it was the standard recommendation for difficult shaded areas across professional garden design. Then it got overplanted. Landscape architects specified it by the thousand for low-maintenance corporate contracts in the 1980s. It delivered exactly what was promised. But domestic gardeners saw it carpeting office parks and stopped seeing it as something for a home garden. Success in the wrong context killed its reputation at home. It spreads by underground stolons, creates a connected living mat below soil surface. Evergreen glossy leaves block light continuously. The underground spread means it colonizes beneath the soil before weeds establish at the surface. 12 months of suppression. 0 inputs after the first season. Shade under trees. North-facing slopes. The areas where nothing else has succeeded. Think of it as the plant that got blamed for the company it was forced to keep. The most reliable things are often the ones we stopped noticing because they never failed us. Number 5. Creeping. Phlox. The waterfall of spring color. In April, it covers itself so completely in flowers that the foliage disappears entirely. A cascade of pink, purple, or white pouring over walls and down slopes like something that should require considerably more effort than it does. Then the flowers finish, and the evergreen mat gets back to suppressing weeds quietly for the rest of the year. Phlox subulata, native to eastern North America, used by the Iroquois as a medicinal plant before European contact. Introduced to European gardens in the 18th century, where it became central to rock garden design. Thomas Jefferson grew it at Monticello. His garden records from 1812 document it as a reliable early spring bloomer along the terraced borders. Jefferson was a serious gardener. He did not grow things that did not perform. Dense, needle-like evergreen foliage forms a solid mat between flowering periods. Drought-tolerant once established. Thrives on slopes where water runs off too fast for most plants to hold on. Retaining walls. Sunny slopes, rock gardens, front of dry borders where the spring display earns its place. I watched a single plant cascade over a stone wall for the first time in full bloom and stood there longer than I intended to. Think of it as the plant that saves its most spectacular moment for the time of year you need it most. The most generous displays often come from the things that ask the least in return. Number 4. Epimedium. The toughest ground cover. Nobody talks about dry shade under mature trees. Compacted root-filled soil. Competing with established hedgerows for every drop of moisture. Epimedium grows in all of these conditions and produces some of the most delicate flowers in the spring garden while doing it. Nobody talks about this plant enough. That is the only thing wrong with it. Li Shuzhen, the 16th century Chinese physician who spent 27 years compiling the Benkao Gangmu, the most comprehensive herbal record in Chinese history, documented Epimedium for kidney and bone health. The active compound icarian has since been confirmed in modern pharmaceutical research as biologically active. 2,000 years of folk medicine, one modern confirmation. The healers were correct the whole time. Spreads by rhizome, evergreen or semi-evergreen depending on variety. Creates a dense ground layer that excludes weeds completely once established. The heart-shaped leaves turn bronze and copper in winter when most ground covers look defeated and colorless. The single best plant for dry shade under established trees. Plant it and walk away. Divide every 5 years if you want more of it. The modern garden center model rewarded instant impact. Epimedium could not compete on that timeline and disappeared from mainstream recommendation lists because of it. Think of it as the plant that rewards the gardener who thinks in years rather than seasons. Patience is not a gardening weakness. It is the whole strategy. Number 3, wild strawberry, the ground cover that feeds you. It spreads aggressively, suppresses weeds completely, and produces fruit every summer from the same plants without any input from you. An edible weed control system. That combination should not need selling. Charles V of France had 1,200 wild strawberry plants installed at the Louvre in 1368. Before the large fruited cultivated strawberry arrived from North America in the 18th century, this was the strawberry. The one Shakespeare wrote about. The one grown in royal gardens across medieval Europe. Small, intensely flavored, more concentrated in every compound that makes a strawberry taste like a strawberry than anything sold commercially today. Spreads by runners that root at every node. Creates an interconnected mat extremely difficult for weeds to penetrate. Tolerates partial shade. Fruits reliably from the same plants year after year without division or feeding. Orchard underplanting. Shaded borders. Woodland edges. Slopes where you want coverage and something worth harvesting at the same time. The commercial strawberry industry standardized around larger fruit that photographed well and survived shipping. The flavor was never the priority. The wild strawberry never got that compromise. Think of it as the strawberry that never had to become something easier to sell. The most flavorful things are almost always the ones that were never scaled for profit. Number 2, creeping rosemary, the Mediterranean waterfall. It cascades over walls, covers dry sunny banks, blooms blue in winter when almost nothing else is flowering. Every part of it is edible, and it has been doing exactly this since Roman armies planted it across every territory they occupied. Salvia rosmarinus prostratus group, the prostrate form of rosemary. Pliny the Elder documented rosemary cultivation in the 1st century AD. Roman legions carried it across the empire, not as a luxury, but as a practical plant, culinary, medicinal, preservative. By the medieval period, it was established in monastery gardens across Europe. Rosemary for remembrance is not poetic invention. It was a documented practice in Greek funeral tradition that the Romans absorbed and distributed across the ancient world. The prostrate form spreads by surface layering. Woody stems root where they touch ground. Creates impenetrable coverage on slopes and banks. The aromatic oils in the foliage inhibit germination of competing seeds. A natural allelopathic barrier that smells extraordinary while doing its job. Dry, sunny slopes, over the edges of raised beds, retaining walls, wherever drainage is excellent and the sun is full. If this list has changed how you see your garden, subscribe now and share it with someone still fighting weeds the expensive way. The number 1 entry is the one that will stay with you longest. Think of it as the plant the Roman Empire used to hold its ground and never stopped. Some things have been working this long because they were always right. Number 1, sweet violet, the ground cover that conquered Europe and then got forgotten. Stop. Before we get into this one, because this one carries more history than almost any plant on this list. Napoleon carried dried sweet violets from Josephine's grave to his own death. Victoria and Albert exchanged them as tokens of devotion. The entire Victorian perfume industry was built on this flower. His supporters used it as a secret political symbol during his exile. The French called it La Fleur de l'Exil, the exile flower, and it spreads across bare ground, suppresses weeds completely, blooms in February when nothing else is moving, and costs almost nothing to propagate. Viola odorata. Grown in ancient Athens since at least 300 BC. Theophrastus documented it. Monastery gardens grew it through the medieval period as food, medicine, and beauty simultaneously. It spreads by runners and by self-fertile seeds produced at the base of the plant through summer. That dual propagation strategy means it colonizes ground faster than almost any other perennial ground cover. Evergreen rosettes suppress weeds through winter. It blooms before weed pressure even begins. The perfume industry synthesized violet fragrance artificially in the early 20th century, and the commercial reason to grow it vanished overnight. Within 2 generations, a plant with 3,000 years of continuous cultivation history became a wildflower most gardeners pull out without recognizing. I found a patch growing in a forgotten corner last spring, knelt down, smelled it, understood immediately why Napoleon kept it until the end. Think of it as the flower that carried an empire's grief, sweetened a queen's table, and is currently growing in the crack between your garden wall and the path. Beauty that persists without recognition is not waiting to be rescued. It is just waiting to be seen. 20 ground covers. 1 decision. No more bare soil. You did not lose the battle against weeds because you were not trying hard enough. You lost it because you were using the wrong system. Membrane degrades. Bark chip disappears. Chemicals exhaust the soil they were supposed to protect. A living ground cover does the opposite. It builds the ground it covers. It gets stronger every year. It asks for less every season. Your garden was never meant to be fought. It was meant to be planted. The weed control industry needs you to keep losing. These plants need you to plant them once and walk away. Subscribe if you are not already. See you in the next one.